Welcome to this very special presentation of the Center for Security Policy, our webinar on fighting for freedom in Iran. There are millions of Iranians who are doing just that at the moment. And we at the center believe very strongly that it is incumbent upon others of us who love freedom and who have the privilege of enjoying it to rally to their cause and to help them to the extent we can. To discuss both what is happening on the ground in Iran at the moment and the stakes for not just the people of Iran, but for the world in the removal of the totalitarian, mullahocracy that has misruled Iran for 4 decades. We have been joined by several distinguished Iranian expats now living in the United States and deeply involved in what is happening in Iran and in close contact with the, revolutionaries that are in the streets of Tehran and cities across the land at this very moment. We're going to start with Marty Yusufiani, also known as Merdad Yusufiani. He is the president and CEO of Caspian Balestra Group, an operation that he has forged to lead, among other things, in smart or solar uh, generation, power generation plants in the sun-rich Persian Gulf. He has been a leader in this space, and we are delighted to have him with us today. Marty, over to you.
Thank you very much, Frank, for first of all hosting this and bringing our Iran experts around the table. This is, in my view, everybody's view, in terms of the Middle East paradigm, one of the most important consequential developments we've had in the past nearly half a century. I'd like to start off by actually departing from what is traditional Washington speak, and that is typically hedging and positioning in terms of alternative views and so on and so forth. And I'd like to be bold, in fact, declare that what the world is today witnessing is a revolution in Iran. Now, of course, we know revolutions are only declared such after the revolution is complete. And where we are on this line of revolution, beginning, middle, or end, fact of the matter is, once you look at the Iranian theater right now, this has all elements of a revolution. It includes all social strata, all age groups, all ethnicities, all the various layers of society. And therefore, I dare to say that we are witnessing a revolution, meaning that the totality of the Islamic regime is being rejected by the Iranian people, number one. Number two, I believe this is the most consequential feminist movement that Iran is projecting onto world stage, especially in that it is not coming out of Hollywood or New York, Los Angeles, or Paris or London, but as a matter of fact, out of Tehran and out of the capital of Islamist Shiism. That in itself is a consequential consideration that I believe merits special attention. Number two. Number three, in a bigger strategic viewpoint, I believe that we may in fact be witnessing what can be called a perfect storm, in that the alliance between Tehran, that's the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Moscow, which have increasingly demonstrated to rely on one another, whether it be military support or financial bypassing of sanctions, we may see a perfect storm whereby both Tehran and Moscow fall, and thereby project an entirely new paradigm into the geostrategic construct of Europe on one front and the Middle East on another. In the Middle East, to be specific, we can possibly see the day after the Islamic regime, the unraveling of the so-called Shiite crescent. We can see how immediately funding towards Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the various proxies that the regime has been supporting in Iraq and Syria, and, for example, the Houthis in Yemen, that will all go by the wayside, and introduce more stability, specifically in Iraq. And of course, the littoral states of the Persian Gulf will also benefit from that calm and strategic alliances that is awaiting that market. So with these 3 points, I really think it merits important capital cities such as Washington, London, and Paris, and Brussels to pay close attention to the opportunity that exists today to side with the Iranian people. No one is asking for intervention of any kind, but at times like this, simple declarations of support is worth $1 million. And so I think when one asks, what can we do besides some of the obvious, the most important thing that Washington and important capital cities can do is declare in one voice and say the name mahsaamini. Thank you.
Marty, thank you very much. I think that splendidly introduces the main thrust of what we are confronting at the moment and the importance of the United States as a interested party, shall we say. We'll talk more, I'm sure, about the roles that it should be playing, if not through some sort of intervention on the outside with your co-panelists.
As you said, the oil industry, which history demonstrates is in fact what was the final straw that broke the back of the previous regime under the Shah of Iran, that is when things went completely kaput, when especially winter had rolled in, and then you had the army faced with a situation they couldn't move their trucks in the streets. Regular people didn't have fuel to heat their homes, to eat, to cook, to fly. So these are indications, and I wanted to just validate that for especially the observers not to look too closely to what's happening today and tomorrow or next week. Look at the trend lines. When is the next opportunity that we see the rats jump ship? As Damon mentioned earlier, the constant bickering and the in-house challenge or pointing fingers, who's at fault or what points we can compromise. These are all indications that the regime itself is starting to resesh or disintegrate from within. That's exactly true, David. Absolutely. The implications, and since we're talking about narratives, this has been one of the narratives that the regime has been playing with its domestic audience. Playing this game and this charade that, yes, through JCPOA, wink, wink, nod, nod, this is all a green light, this is all a validation of this regime. And the problem here with the West is the old story of the frog and the scorpion. We, every single time we cross that river, and we get stung, and then we say, oh my God, it's the nature of the beast. Well, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, how many more? Picking up on the narrative story here is something very, very curious is happening in Washington now. Just a couple of days ago, we witnessed the 2 flagships of center-right and center-left publications, both coming out in favor of what we're talking about, being very, very careful about sanctions, and that the sanctions are in fact hurting the Iranian women. This is quite astonishing, quite astonishing to the Iranian diaspora, as well as the Iranian in Iran. We have a wonderful representation here in Shukriya. You do not hear the Iranian women in the streets chanting, remove sanctions. They're chanting, down with Islamic Republic. And inclusive in that is the understanding in Iran that yes, we are in pain. Yes, we are paying dearly through these sanctions. However, we have reached a point that we do not care anymore. And for our liberal and our conservative friends in Washington to come and say, hey, maybe the sanctions are going to hurt the women, let's consider removing them. Well, why doesn't anybody look into what that means? That means giving the Islamist regime billions of dollars to buy the batons, the bullets, and the tear gas that they go and crush the skulls of the mahsaaminis. So
Yes.
sanctions removal, a convergence of right and left coming together for that is an absolute no-no to the diaspora and the Iranian street. I think it's incumbent on Iranian Americans and Iranians anywhere to reach out to their representations and make a point of that, because that in itself will be seen as a gross turning back on the Iranian people.
Marty, there are those of us who have been following the machinations, both over the Obama years and certainly with this administration, as well as this National Islamic American Council, NIAC, as a example of a sort of regime influence operation that I suspect is very much behind that kind of campaign, which, as you say,
Absolutely.
is striking in that it is both sort of leftish and rightish.
They've been very effective. I think we all, the Iranian diaspora is clearly aware of the effectiveness of what's known as the Iran lobby, and it includes a number of different groups and individuals and personality. But that points to a different issue, Frank and David. You both know this very well, and that is the expertise, the efficacy with which the Javad Zarifs, classically American educated, who speaks eloquently and who knows the game and knows how to read the polls and the electioneering and how to lobby and which committee and all of that. They have been the master of weaving the corridors of power in Washington primarily, and also in Europe. So, but the tide is turning because the diaspora is coming together. It has awakened. They have, basically saying we will no longer drink from the lemonade or the Kool-Aid it is.
Yeah, we're over time a little bit. I did want to just take advantage of this terrific team to ask each of you to just say in a very brief minute or so, if you could, specifically what you would like the United States to do that could make a difference in Iran at this juncture. And let's just stipulate for the purposes of discussion that not continuing these negotiations on the so-called nuclear deal is a given. I think that is obvious. But what else will express solidarity, will convey in a tangible way the support of the United States for the people of Iran? Can we go through the batting order from start to finish? Marty, shall we start with you?
Sure. There is so much that can be done. I think we can give you a whole list of items to do.
Just a couple.
Items not to do. But I think philosophically, to look back and look at some of the great moments that America projected its leadership and moral authority are moments when personalities such as Ronald Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now, it didn't mean that he did not negotiate with them. It didn't mean that he did not try to bring some form of a dialogue forward, but he stood firmly, and the world knew, and Mr. Gorbachev knew, and especially the Soviet citizens knew where Washington stands. Today, I can tell you not only Iranian people do not know where Washington stands, I dare to say that many of our friends of our allies in the region have experienced over and over and over how the rug is pulled, how that firm spine is no longer one that we can stand lean on. So I would say if Washington is not going to do anything, as the Hippocratic oath says, first do no harm.
Right.
Okay, do no harm by dealing with the suppressors. Do
Yes.
no harm by dealing with the Islamist regime, and be vocal. And when it comes to it, if only being rhetorical, be completely clear about where Washington stands.
Good. Thank you. But I think that particularly this closing round has been enormously helpful to me, and I hope to our audience, and more to the point, really, to the public policy decision making that will be coming to the fore. We hope in the next few days. Stop legitimating this regime. Clearly, is critical. Start legitimating the people who are seeking to not just modify its behavior, but to replace it, lock, stock, and barrel. And I think, David, your suggestion about making funds available, I don't know where exactly things stand with the $7 billion that I think the South Koreans and others have been holding, um, whether that's been released to the regime or not. But if it's not, you could buy a lot of support for strikers in the various sectors we've talked about, the Bazaris, the students, the doctors, and others, um, with a fraction of that sum. But the biggest point, I think, David, is your concluding one. Moral clarity is something that has been absent from successive administrations. We focused to some extent on the Democrats. Even Barack Obama is now professing that it was a mistake not to have stood more solidly with the Green Revolution. But clearly, we have failed again and again and again and again under Republican as well as Democratic administrations to stand against the mullahocracy and for the people of Iran, even though it is transparently in our interest to do so, as well as in the interest of those long suffering people in Iran. I want to thank all of you for the contributions you've made to clarifying uh, just how vital this moment is, the stakes that are associated with it, the reasons we must not persist in the mistakes of the past, and that there are some very specific, some very practical things that we can do right now that could make a difference for the people, for their narrative, for the leadership that will emerge, and for the future of Iran, for the region, and of course, for our vital interests there and beyond. So I want to thank Marty Yusufiani, uh, Shakriya Broudest, Damon Goldiz, and of course David Wormser, who deserves the lion's share of the credit for putting this program together, by the way, and we're very appreciative to him for that.